In today's episode, unfortunately, we are going to be wrapping things up for the season. I'll get more into that later and the reasons why, but for now we find ourselves in a 26th throne. In this key, I don't know what it is about Beast Mastery Hunter, or maybe I'm just cracked, but I was doing some insane damage going through this key. But by the time we get to the gauntlet area, I'm still sustaining over a 400k overall, which I think for throne is pretty impressive. I was kind of gapping the Moonkin, sorry mind the moons, but I think I was just killing everything before he could even ramp up. I still love you, bro. Turns out he was one of my viewers. He played really well, to be fair. The AoE CC coordination in this group was something that I had never seen before, honestly. We had perfect sigil placement from the DH. We had amazing leg sweeps. We obviously have the consistent stops with the augmentation evoker. And then Mind the Moons was filling those gaps with the big Ursol's Vortex Typhoons and also those in-cap roars. Super nice group, and this key went super smoothly because of that. We did have a nice skip on the goblins throughout the gauntlet. The DH placed the Sigil of Misery down, and as long as he's the person to get in combat first, after we all run to the other side, he will then Shadow Melt and it will drop combat for all of us. You can do the same thing with a Freezing Trap for Hunters. Obviously, it will only work for one enemy though. We timed this key with just under 3 minutes left, and we got a huge 11 score out of this. I mean, it just goes to show you, throwing as a tight timer, this group was just honestly insane. I feel bad because the Moonkin doesn't look like he was doing much damage in comparison to me, but he was pumping the bosses. His CC was insane as well, so shout out to Moons. Next, we'll jump into the last key for this episode that we're going to commentate over. We do time a 26 Dark Heart Thicket here. The Monk did seem to die quite a lot throughout this key. And honestly, my cooldowns were coming up at weird times throughout this key as well. I don't know if it wasn't even the route that we were doing, honestly, because it was just a standard route pretty much. But my Call of the Wild would come up for the 3-pack after the first boss, so I had to pop it then just to get it on cooldown. And then after that, we did a bigger pool where I would have got a lot more value. But it is what it is. We were still slamming through this key. We ended up lusting the horrors downstairs instead of Oakheart, just getting lust on cooldown that much quicker. Also, the horrors are quite a scary pack on Fortified, especially in those high keys. On Oakheart, I was having a little dilemma with myself here. I didn't know whether it was more value to disengage the roots to help out the tank. I'm sure it's probably not on a Fortified week, but maybe on a Tyrannical week. But then I also want to save my disengage for the Crushing Grip. If it targets me, I can avoid the damage by disengaging out of it. Kind of trolled a little bit after Oakheart. With these slimes that burst whenever they die, they do a lot of damage, especially on Fortified. I was prepared, but apparently too prepared, because I pressed Exil before any of them went off. I don't know if I just panicked. I don't really know what was going on here. So kind of a little bit troll there, but I did end up surviving anyway. Honestly, a super smooth key though, so there's not too much to note. We had a few deaths over the course of the key. It was mostly the Monk dying, I think. Can't really remember what he was dying to. But here in the tunnel at the end, if you're stood in melee range, if everybody is stood in melee range of the Stalker, he won't do a Dark Hunt, which is basically just a one-shot on a high fortified key. I was stood literally on top of the mob here, but I think because the Evoker was stood out, he Dark Hunted to him, it looks like, and then he teleports back to me and just one-shots me. It proc the Evoker's cheat death, but obviously I don't have that, so it just insta-killed me. So if the Evoker did play in melee range there and everybody was in melee, then he would not leap out at all, and then I would have lived. Considering how smooth this key was as well, it was kind of close on the timer. I mean, we still got a minute and a half left, but I'm doing a 400k overall in a Dark Heart Thicket, which I'm pretty happy with myself. This dungeon is nothing to write home about for overalls, but yeah, it seemed like I was pumping in this one. The Rogue was doing some decent damage as well. But we do end up timing the key. We get 4 score out of this, taking us up to 3,381. Now, unfortunately, here is where my season kind of fell apart. In all honesty, I haven't really pushed since the last few keys that I'm about to show you, and you guys might be able to guess why. I did really enjoy my time pushing on the Hunter, but eventually I did hit a massive burnout, partly due to the fact that I got really bored of BM Hunter, standing 40 yards away with one of the easiest rotations and little to no visual feedback. It got old really quickly. And this, coupled with the fact that as a non-meta class, it takes at least 30 minutes to actually get into a group from spam signing up, and also cancelling when I don't get taken after 2 minutes. And then once I do get myself into the group, the key normally depletes anyway, as you can probably see here in the background. To be honest, I'm not really sure why Blizzard limit you to only signing up to 5 keys at a time. I'm sure there is a valid reason, don't get me wrong, but it does limit the amount of dungeons you get into massively. And even if they upped it to 10 max signups, I think that would help out tremendously. Because the amount of potential invites you probably miss from signing for 5, waiting, and then signing for another 5, makes the already impossible task of pugging a lot harder. Now, obviously, the problem of the keys that do end up depleting is just part of the pugging or pushing experience in general. I've been the reason for the depletes here and there, and everyone has their bad days. but it just feels even worse now that you've wasted an hour getting into the key and then it depletes after 10 minutes. I think that Blizzard seriously needs to rework the Mythic Plus system in general. We all know this by now, and don't get me wrong, I do not have the answers, but it is interesting to entertain some of the ideas, like, do Blizzard need to remove affixes? Originally, I was completely against this, but now I don't really know where I stand. If you're watching this video, you're probably seeing endless keys be depleted to affixes like bursting. I mean, Everbloom is one of my favorite dungeons this season, but whenever you have an affix like bursting or bolstering, or even Sanguine now, it very quickly becomes my least favorite dungeon. Affixes do make the content more replayable, I know that, so do they just need to fine-tune the affixes even more? Like, to be fair to Blizzard, they have done a good job so far in my opinion, but even just like hotfix the dread petals to not interact with the affixes, and it will make Everbloom an amazing dungeon. I honestly cannot believe that they haven't done that this season already. But also, do they just need to rework the affix system as a whole, and maybe have one seasonal affix that is a kiss curse effect, and then add on to that fortified and tyrannical, because personally I do like those affixes, especially now that you have different score for different weeks. It gives you that reason to push on each week, because before you would probably just ignore the tyrannical week, right? So in my opinion, the fortified and tyrant can stay, but maybe they do need to get rid of the other affixes in general, because there's always, like, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be a push week. I'm not naive to that. There's always going to be a week that is going to be the easiest in terms of affixes, and I'm not against that. It's just the fact that I do not want to play Everbloom at all this week because it's bursting or because it's bolstering. I do like the idea of it making you think, and maybe you have to change up your route. Like in the Everbloom, for example, bolstering, you wouldn't take the abominations as much, but then sometimes it's inevitable and you have to take them, whether it's for count or maybe they're just in your way and you can't skip them. And then you bolster them by 60% and they just one-shot your group with a Noxious Eruption. So yeah, I don't know if they get rid of affixes altogether. I don't know the answers, but something does need to change, and that is just for affixes alone. Next, I wanted to talk about the needed rework to the signing experience. Again, like the push weeks, a meta will always exist, so as a BM hunter, I know that I'm hurting my chances of getting into a higher key, but this is even a problem at lower levels. For example, a Fire Mage may be a meta spec in a high key because of its massive priority damage, utility, and defensives, but it's not necessarily a meta spec in a plus 20. I think that a BM hunter, or I know that my BM hunter, would dunk on a Fire Mage all day in that key level range because defensives aren't that relevant. So why do people still only invite the meta specs when it won't harm their key? Obviously, this is mainly the community at fault here, but I do also think it stems from a bigger problem of the depletion system. Depleting a key and having to run it at a key level you've already timed, hoping that you time it again or pray you get accepted to another key so that you can re-roll your key, feels like bad design. And I know a lot of the community want this reworked. Again, how do we do this? People have thrown around the ideas of being able to choose just any dungeon from any levels of the same dungeon you previously timed, plus one key level higher for that specific dungeon, meaning over and over again you can try and time the key you need. And it is hard to know the consequences of this system, but to me that sounds a lot more pleasant than just having to run and pray you time a key that you've already timed, just for it to maybe turn into a higher key that you've already timed, where you have to do exactly the same again. This in turn would mean that much more people will be listing their own keys, so supply for your own group will become much more sparse, but maybe, who knows, that could be a good thing. Much more keys to freely choose from and less competition of getting into the groups. And to be honest, people have thrown around the idea of a solo queue system. Again, I'm no expert, but I don't think a solo queue system would work. But honestly, at this point, I'm down to try anything to try and repair this game mode, because ultimately it is the only reason that I play WoW for the long term. To wrap things up, I did have a very fun time pushing this season, don't get me wrong. I ended the season at 3,390 Mythic Plus score. It was a good effort, I feel like. Title is looking like it's going to be over 3,600, at least for EU, which means I'd need at least all 28s timed with most 29s, I think. I'm honestly not too sure, but I'm definitely a long way off of that. And I was struggling with getting into 26s, so I definitely don't fancy signing for 28s. It would have been nice if I could have got it to a round number of 3.4. Maybe I'll do that at some point in the rest of the season, but 3,390 is the highest I've ever been. I'm sure you guys noticed that I played with Seb Scaly a lot, which honestly made the pugging experience a lot more bearable. He's an okay player, but also just being able to re-roll 2 keys or pick 2 keys to push makes it a lot more bearable, honestly. I still called this series Pugging to Title, even though I did a lot of keys with him, just because I feel like us two playing DPS specs doesn't impact the group that much. Like, we still don't have control over how the key goes, to be honest. It definitely does help, don't get me wrong. But yeah, learning the ins and outs of my spec, granted I know it's not a tricky one, But honestly, I think that hunters do need more credit for being able to survive. Most of the keys that I've ran, due to knowledge of the dungeon and also my class, I'll outlive most other pugs no matter what spec they're on. It's really fun to try and like master your spec and prove that it's worthy of inviting in high keys. Again, not to toot my own horn, but along with surviving, I'd almost always top damage in the key too. And it just goes to show that you should bring the player over the class in most situations. Don't get me wrong, I know that you'll need like a bloodlust, you'll need those combat reses, but if you've got a spare 3rd DPS spot, most specs can clear up to like near the highest level. So just invite them. Especially with like classes, say like, let's pick a Feral Druid, right? Most Feral players have played Feral and they've been a Feral main for their whole entire WoW career, right? So they know the ins and outs of everything about their class. They are probably going to play that spec at a better level than a Photon Reroller would play their Fire Mage when they don't know the defensives, they don't know their buttons, they don't know what utility to use when. In the higher keys, they are definitely better at this, but they're not going to know it to the nth degree like a Feral Druid would know their own class. I know that I'm wasting my breath because it's just a community perception thing as a whole, but like I referred to earlier, I do think it maybe stems a lot from the depletion system. I have met some great people along the way of pushing as well. Along with the bad, I've had many positive pug experiences, had some really nice groups along with some very good players as well. I also ran into many viewers that I didn't even know watched me, so GG's to you guys. And this series will definitely be back in Season 4. I may have to rebrand the series, who knows? I've got a few ideas ready for Season 4, so stay tuned for that. But as far as this series, I love the format that I've done. I don't really think I've seen anybody else do this kind of format where they break down all their mistakes and keys for other people to learn. But maybe I'll do it pushing with a team, for example, or maybe I do it on a different spec. I know for sure that I'm going to be re-rolling next season, so that'll give this series a breath of fresh air. Hopefully the spark will come back for me pushing as well, because honestly, this season for the last, I don't know, maybe a month, I just have not wanted to push at all. I think a lot of it does honestly come down to the fact that I'm just not enjoying my hunter right now. But yeah, I know that you guys have massively enjoyed this series and I appreciate you all watching. So until Season 4, it's been fun. If you guys did like this series, then it would mean a lot to me if you could drop a like down below, leave a comment as well, maybe leave a comment of what spec you'd want to see me try and pug to title on in Season 4. Subscribe to your boy while you're at it, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.